Okay. Well, we've got everyone here. Let's go ahead and get this kicked off. Hopefully, Michael gets his microphone turned on by the time I get to him with the roll call attendance. We'll start with Susan Franklin.
Susan Franklin here.
Corey Evans.
Corey Evans here.
Brian Host here, and Michael Dick.
Yes, I'm here.
Perfect. Thank you. We are officially in session. The time is 6:09. We have an agenda that starts with water and sewer, but I hadn't seen anything from them. And I guess I'd ask you, Michelle, whether or not we have any requests coming in from water and sewer this year, and whether or not they're going to be joining us this evening.
So, yep, we have Chris Pratt here. He's going to present on behalf of water.
Super.
They have a couple of requests. Mrs. Jenkins is also here.
Okay.
But for quorum issues, we'll have one in at a time. Ralph is actually joining in right now, so that's great.
So he is back in town.
Yep.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Chris. We're going to wait 1 minute for Ralph Dormitzer just because he's going to be joining as the 5th member of Capital Budget, and he will be a voting member this evening. So I just want to acknowledge his presence before we kick off.
Okay.
There he is. Hi, Ralph. And I'm going to modify the roll call attendance and call your name, Ralph Dormitzer.
Yeah, Ralph Dormitzer here.
Perfect. Okay. So, Ralph, for this evening, you are the 5th member. You will be a voting member to the extent there's anything that we choose as a committee to vote on. And the time's 6:10, and there are 5 members in presence. So, Chris, I'll turn it over to you for water.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for your time tonight. Chris Pratt, King Street, Chair of the Water Commission. We just have one article for a capital purchase for the Water Department. It's part of our capital plan. It's actually a year after we had it on the capital plan, so it will take place in fiscal year 25. But it is a planned replacement of an aging existing fleet truck. So it's replacing a 2006 Chevy. So we will be sourcing and hopefully procuring a more of a utility work truck. So we're estimating that cost is going to be approximately $85,000. So that's what we're requesting.
Okay. Sorry.
2007 was the vehicle you're replacing?
2006.
6. Thank you.
Let me kick off with 1 or 2 questions, and then we'll circle the room. Seems pretty straightforward. First of all, what is the source of funds? Is that coming out of retained earnings? Is it coming out of the water capital stabilization fund? Where's it coming from?
I mean, believe it or not, I mean, I was actually going to ask you that question because the other folks I've asked that question, I can't quite get an answer from, but so I don't know.
Okay.
I would need to be aided on that answer as well. Okay. And it's also because when I was just reviewing the capital plan, which was created by Don and some other folks that I don't think are still with us, he actually has a note in a fiscal year 27 fleet vehicle. He has a note that that's coming from retained earnings, but in this particular one, there is no note saying it's coming from retained earnings. So I don't know why there would be a difference, why the future one would be coming from retained earnings and why this one may not. So to be honest, I don't know. We do have plenty in retained earnings and stabilization if needed to cover this cost. But I would need some input on that.
Okay. First of all, so correct me if I'm wrong, Michelle, but Don is on retainer as a consultant for us at this point in time, is he not? Okay. So to the extent, Chris, you have any questions on anything that he's done, he's a phone call away. He's also a phone call away for guidance as to where the funding should come from. Capital is principally focused on just making sure that we don't overspend our resources and put the enterprise fund into a position where it's, the town has to step up as the backstop and fund it. So that's the primary role. So we've generally focused on, making sure that you had sufficient retained earnings for any, capital spend in or debt commitment that you were gonna take on. This one doesn't really rise to that level, but I'm gonna confess I don't know where we would typically fund a truck out of. I mean, logically it would come out of a water stabilization fund. I'm curious what the last one we've done was and where we funded it, how we funded it. If anyone knows the answer to the question, maybe a water liaison or from Capital or Michelle or anyone.
Brian, I'm the water liaison,
Okay.
and I do not know.
Okay.
What I do know, though, and needs to be looked into, is that there's been a disconnect between the Water Commission and the Town Manager's Office in getting reimbursements and getting reports. And there have been some questions about moves that Don Hyatt had made in the past years. So from where I sit, I would highly recommend and urge that there be a meeting of the minds between the Town Manager's Office and the Water Commission to resolve many of these questions, because there's more than just this one.
Okay, that's both concerning, but a helpful recommendation, and certainly cooperation makes all this stuff work. So, does anyone know when the last time the water department bought a truck was? I
think it was about 4 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. Chris, does that
it's
sound
been a while.
right?
I know
It's
I've
about-
seen one, but it hasn't been
Yeah.
recent.
I believe it's within the last 5 years. I don't know
Yeah.
exactly the year.
I'm just curious what the protocol was, and I actually think that the water stabilization fund was set up more recently, if my memory's serving me correctly. But I've got a couple of COVID fog spots that get in the way occasionally.
So it's sort of been explained to me over the last year and a half of asking that the stabilization fund is not necessarily used for capital expenses or expenses. It's more of sort of a savings account.
So
Well,
you're
I
using it as a true stabilization fund for an
Correct.
emergency, as opposed, and you're funding regular capital items out of retained earnings as
Correct.
you generate it. Okay.
Correct.
Well, then it sounds like that's how this vehicle should be funded.
Okay.
The last vehicle was purchased and was approved in 2020,
Okay.
based on our records.
And it looks like it's funded out of retained earnings, Michelle?
Yes.
Okay. That's certainly my recollection of how this has been done. And Chris, where are your retained earnings at this point in time versus the commitments against them?
So it was certified in October of 23 at 1.86, 1,861,000. We did approve, or the town approved 300,000 in November. So in actuality, it is at 1,561,000.
So we approved 300K at STM. Okay. And so we're sitting at 1.56. Okay. So we've got plenty of capital sitting in retained earnings. And refresh my memory, I know we approved, I believe about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, a significant amount of bonding so that we could commit to 2 years worth of water main upgrades. Can you give us just an update on where we are in the execution of that plan, both in terms of putting pipe in the ground, but also incurring the debt, and where that leaves us with regards to?
Yes. So it was 2.6 million was approved for water main upgrades on a variety of streets, 3 or 4 different streets, relatively short sections on multiple streets. We found that the cost of doing Beechwood Street most recently was a bit more than prices have gone up. So we're anticipating prices will be going up. So the 2.6 million that we have approved will likely do half of what we may have wanted to do, when this was originally thought of 5 or so years ago. Kind of just in the timeline of that whole process. Looking at the capital plan that Don and others worked on, seeing what was allocated for some of these streets, I think are just low, very low compared to what we can get nowadays. So that's being revisited. But to answer your question, Brian, the 2.6 million is going to begin with a section on South Main Street from basically St. Stephen's Church through the center of town, a small section of Elm Street to about Brook Street to connect with the new main, and then continuing to St. Anthony's. So that is almost a mile, I believe. I forget the exact linear footage, but that is our first project as part of that authorization. We are about 98% complete on design and engineering. So we're hoping to put those plans out to bid very shortly, within the next 30 days. And the tentative plan would be to begin construction late summer, early fall. Obviously logistics and bidding, all things considered. But we're sensitive to the fact of the time of year and the area of town. But that is our first effort to put that money to work. That is an 1800s main. That's why it's the highest priority at the moment. When that's completed, we will roll into a section on Atlantic Avenue from Cunningham Bridge to basically the end of the beach parking lot. Those plans have not begun. As soon as we wrap up with our engineers, for South Main Street, we will get them working on the Atlantic Ave plans.
Chris, if I may, is the section of pipe that you're talking about include the section that burst last year or 2 years ago? Is that main section?
Correct. So right in the center of town last year, when we had the leak under the culvert right in the center of town, that section of pipe was just replaced. But that is the main that we're talking about. Yes.
Okay, thanks.
And Chris, on that subject, just refresh my memory. I remember at town meeting, one of the town meetings, either special or annual, and we put aside a chunk of money to fix that situation with the culvert. I don't remember if the appropriation was for the culvert itself or for the water pipe, but I do remember it was sort of a best guess number. Are we done in terms of replacing that pipe, and did we get it done, that damaged area within the amount of money that was appropriated?
Yes. That's why we did it. We used $150,000 approved at town meeting to supplement the budget to pay for that. So the $150,000 that was approved at town meeting went to pay for those extraordinary system maintenance expenses.
Okay.
And that is done. The work is done. That section of main has been replaced. Just for a little history, that culvert, which is quite old, our water main goes under that culvert.
Yeah.
That's why it was such a complicated project and a very heavy project. We had to shut all the water off. We put in 2 new shutoffs on each side of the culvert, and the main now goes over the culvert instead of underneath. So there were sort of trade-offs to doing both. We could have tried to go under, risk damage to the culvert, or go over and be a little bit closer to the surface of the road. So we chose to go over. So it's insulated, and obviously it's brand new pipe. So the insulation is solid at this point. The culvert is more under DPW. Brian is aware of some of the things that we can do in the future, but to my knowledge, we haven't done any of that yet, and that would fall under the DPW.
Okay. And did the 150 cover it? Was there money left over? Did we have to dip into any other funds in order to cover it, or where did the project come in? Because I know it was truly a best guess in terms of the 150 number.
It was just under the it was just under 150,
Okay.
and since it was coming out of our operating budget, that covered it.
Perfect. Okay. I guess my only other question, and look, if anyone has any questions, put your hand up, please. Or we can round robin the room, but I don't see anyone motioning. I'll just, you know, unless someone has something, I'll just keep going. My only other question is that you're asking for a Chevy. I know our DPW guys all use Fords, if I'm not mistaken. Ralph's got a question. Let me finish my question. We'll go to you next, Ralph. I guess that, you know, the question is, you know, are you guys, you know, really focused on the Chevys? Are they, you know, better for your purposes? Is there a benefit to using what everyone else is using in terms of the DPW guys from a maintenance perspective? I'll just put that out there because we've got a bunch of pickup trucks and it seems like we've got a mixed fleet and it would be better to be standardized generally.
So we're replacing a Chevy.
Yeah.
We haven't yet selected the maker model. We're still working with the shell on that, and all the only feedback we've gotten from sort of the field guys is not a Dodge. So I agree. Standardizing with the fleet in the town would make sense, but not something I've really dug into before. But happy to do what makes sense.
Okay. You know, the DPW guys have a few, the facilities guys have a few pickups. I'm pretty sure the DPW and facilities guys both use the same make and model. And I'm pretty sure they're Ford. So it's probably just perhaps loaning one of their vehicles or two and making sure you're happy with them.
Okay.
Just put that out there. Ralph, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, Chris, the areas you're going to do, especially those areas downtown and certainly going down to Brook Street, as far as Brook Street down Elm, will be as disruptive, I think, ultimately as the Elm Street project was. I guess, and also the Beechwood project was. Is there any way you can both minimize the disruption, because it's obviously a critical part of the town? Has anybody thought about all of that? And number two, given the fact that there's a settling required, and it seems to take a great deal of time before we ever get around to finally paving these areas, it would be a shame to see the center of town all the way down to St. Anthony's and also down to Brook Street torn up and left torn up for a couple of years or 3 years, much like Elm Street was. Is there anything you can do in the way of compacting the material, getting a vendor to make sure that it's much smoother than it was? Is there anything you can do, or can anyone do, that would improve the outcomes here so that, in fact, we're not going to look at this? I can imagine us talking about this in a year or two and saying, how come we have such a terrible downtown? And I'm sure you're as aware of as we are. Is there anything can be done? And let me throw out one other question. For some time, and this seems trivial, but it matters a lot, for many reasons. But anyway, there is a valve roughly at the point where you're going to terminate, roughly at Brook Street, but maybe slightly on that, maybe at Stevens Lane. There is a valve that has been broken for at least 2 or 3 years, never replaced. And it controls, of all things, the town pump. And the problem with that is, of course, the town pump then gets manhandled by kids who do all kinds of miserable things to the pump itself because they can't get it to actually work, because we can't turn on the pump because that valve has been broken for 2 years. So the question is the repairing of that valve part of the program? So there are really 2 big things. How can we make sure that the overall program produces a road that is usable sooner rather than later? And then second, what can we do about getting that valve replaced? So those are the 2 big ones, Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Ralph. And thanks for bringing that to my attention. I mean, I'll certainly look at that valve tomorrow with Brendan. I wasn't aware of that, so I'm glad I know. And there may be a backstory to that, so I'll certainly dig into it and find out and get right back to you.
Thanks.
If it's a bigger issue than it seems, then certainly when we're doing construction, we'll get that repaired.
Okay.
We're digging up the road. And to your first question, I mean, certainly it's not ideal. No one's going to want to do this. It's not going to be fun. And we will have to come up with a very detailed plan of execution that includes logistics, community input, communication, and other things. So, you know, even looking at late summer, early fall, I think is iffy, if you know, in my opinion. So, you know, that's what we've been wrestling with for a long time, quite frankly, is how and when. you know, the pipe in areas does date back to the 1800s. So this is one of these things where there's never going to be a good time. And we're up against winter considerations if we get deeper into the fall. You know, there could be delays, there could be issues. So if we get into winter, we're just, you know, getting into more problems. We did think about doing it at night, you know, but then we run into problems with the residents. You know, someone told me there's something like 28 residential units just in that, you know, community downtown. So, you know, with trucks backing up at night, there's no good options. But in terms of the finished product after the pipe is in the ground, there's certainly things that we can do. Much of it exists during construction. We need to have supervision on the job every day from the town, seeing what's going on, seeing how they're doing the fill, how things are happening. And then when the patch goes down for the pavement, there is a contractual requirement that it, you know, only it only raises or lowers a certain amount from the existing asphalt. So, you know, certainly we have to hold the contractor to account for all of those contractual obligations and things that make sense. So we just have to stay on it. We have to communicate with the merchants. We have to work with the committees and get it done as quickly as possible. I think that's, and we're certainly open to feedback. I don't see a better time of year to do it. You know, so, but we're willing to hear any other ideas. We just have to stay on it, do it as quickly as possible, and make sure that the road is in good condition when we're done, you know, and everything is cleaned up nicely.
Yeah. In fact, there's some advantage, I would think, Chris, in doing it in the fall, because when we talk with Brian Joyce, we usually hear that, you know, the settling, he likes to have settling over the winter. That's usually what he says before he does final paving. So maybe there's some advantage in that. So, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough stretch. And there's a lot of services that will need to be bypassed. So one person that's not so much looking forward to would be Brenda at the water department. She'll probably get a few calls during the project, but that is the business we're in. So we will we'll have to get it done.
Right. Thanks.
Thank you.
Anyone else on the committee have any other questions for Chris?
Just a quick one, I suppose, is let me get back and is really, do we know what the stabilization fund balance, actually, the stabilization, not the retained earning, but stabilization fund balance is? Any idea at all, Chris?
It was certified again in October of last year. It's at $182,250.
Okay, not a big number. Okay, got it. Yep.
Right. It did jump up last year though, so we're you know, the previous year was 82,000. So, you know, we're getting money into retained earnings and stabilization each year. One thing to note, we do have another article before town meeting to pay off two short-term notes that were taken out recently. So that will reduce our retained earnings by an additional 479,000. So after this town meeting, if all is approved, we will be just under $1 million in retained earnings would be my rough estimate.
Yeah.
So sorry, Chris, the water stabilization fund is what's the number currently?
182,252.
Okay. So 182, and that's as of STM fundamentally, or October. Okay. That's as of October. And you're going to repay notes or propose to repay notes of how much at town meeting?
It's 479,000.
Okay. And so here's the question. The notes, where did they come from? Are they part of the 2.6 million that was approved and we're just going to pay for them out of retained earnings as opposed to bonding them? Where did the 479 of debt recently come from?
So it's a long story that still has some gray area. However,
Okay.
The short high level is that there was two capital accounts that were running a deficit because they were never funded, which date back to a town meeting in 2020. And so at the close of fiscal year 23, when it was identified by town finance that these capital accounts were in deficit, two bond anticipation notes, two short-term notes in the amount of $300,000 each were taken out. And as it was presented to us, because they were taken out without us knowing, so we learned of this after, the commission learned of this after, it was presented to us that these are two one-year notes, and our options are to pay them off with interest at the end of year one, or they can roll over and we continue to pay the high interest, or they become long-term debt. So the commission has elected to take money from retained earnings to pay off these two notes with interest.
Okay, so I guess my question is the 479 of capital accounts in deficit that dated back to 2020. So it says like we spent 479,000 somewhere, right? Based on something that was supposed to happen in 2020.
It is just under, so 33,000 of that 479 is interest.
Okay. Okay, so it's 479 capital plus interest. I guess my question is, did we approve a call it a $450,000 spend on something back in 2020? Is that my understanding?
Correct.
Okay. What is it that we approved and how was it supposed to be funded at that time?
I'm on a meeting. I'm on a Zoom meeting. Yes. Sorry, I apologize. I'm
No, it
not
happens.
heavy duty tonight.
Apology accepted. We've all got stuff going on in the background.
No, guys, go away. I'm serious. This is oh, sorry. Of course, I'm not.
The risk of the hot mic. It's okay. We've
I
done
know.
that too. All of us.
I know. I gave the wife a night out, and here we are. But so I apologize, gentlemen and ladies. So I'm going to pull up my notes here. So again, this was my this was me piecing it together after this was before my time on the board. So I've been
Chris,
Understood.
do you think it's the insulation at the pump station?
no, I have it right here. So
Okay.
So 300,000 was approved to expand the residuals area at the plant. And 300,000 was approved to conduct a pilot study for the GAC system at the plant.
And how were they supposed to be funded and what actually happened?
I mean, if I could give you a straight answer on that, Brian, I would, but that's sort of what I've been struggling with. And, Mike kind of touched on it. There's a lot of unclear explanations dating back to sort of that COVID time, the remote town meetings. There was, I'm trying to get to the answers of exactly why certain capital accounts weren't funded. And I don't know exactly, that it's not clear.
Yeah, so I'm just thinking out loud. Okay, so we spent so we approved 600K. We had to add to a plan for where that money was coming from. It was either retained earnings or it was going to be debt, right? One or the other. Those were, we didn't have a capital account at that point in water, so those are the only two possible places that we could have approved. I guess we could pull up the warrant and take a look. I don't know if somebody wants to try that while I'm just thinking out loud here and potentially embarrassing myself, but there's really only two places the money could come from, which is could have been approved to come from, which is retained earnings or debt. And it sounds like we spent the money, but we didn't actually either borrow it or pull it out of retained earnings, transfer it out of retained earnings. So where is it? So there's your residuals, right? 300. So that was supposed to come out of the enterprise fund, it appears. I don't know if there was a bonding approval along with this, but water, and then the GAC filtration also out of the enterprise fund. 2020. Can whoever put this up, can you just scroll up to see if there was let's go up and down, stop. Okay, stop there. Okay, so that's the budget. And then scroll down, let's see if there's approval for, we explain if it's gonna be bonded. Keep going down. Okay, stop. Water enterprise revenue and the treasurer of the town.
So they're, let me see if I can pull it up.
So 300 was supposed to come out of,
So there's a confusing piece, and I'm not going to do it justice. Because quite frankly, every time I inquire, I kind of get different bits of information. But there was something to do with two of them being combined, the Elm Street water main and one of these $300,000 projects were combined, and they were supposed to go to bonding for a
yeah,
total of
that's
700.
that's the 750. So the first
Right.
one was 300 was supposed to come out of you. The second one's 750. I think if you scroll back up, Elm Street was 450. Plus the 300 for the GAC gets you to the 750. Is that right? Replace the water main, Elm Street. Yeah, 450. So the 450 plus the 350 is the 750. Okay, go back down.
But
So
but I'm told that at some point the 300 and the 450 were separated because it was determined that more money should be added to Elm Street, and it should be taken out of retained earnings. So the 300,000 that was funded for one of the projects was just never funded. But the water department was issued a capital account number, and money was, expenses were being incurred.
okay, I mean, but we only approved to spend a 450 for Elm Street. So even if we couldn't have spent or bonded above 450. I mean, you can't bond something you didn't spend.
I don't think it was ever bonded.
Okay.
That's what I'm
We only
saying.
bonded so we only bonded 450. I mean, that would be the key question that you're going to want to ask.
But it was, what I was told last week by Don is that it was never bonded. It was determined that it would not be borrowed. It would be taken from retained earnings.
Including Elm Street.
No, I'm talking about Elm Street. Elm Street was separated from one of the $300,000 projects.
Yeah.
And they wanted to add $250,000 to that and take it from retained earnings. So instead of borrowing $750,000, it was determined to take $600,000 out of retained earnings. So when Elm Street and the GAC pilot study were separated,
Mhm.
and it never went to bonding, one of those capital accounts was just, I think, from an accounting standpoint, never funded. Yet expenses for the GAC pilot study were going against it. And it was never brought to anyone's attention until the end of fiscal 23.
Okay. Look, if the money was never pulled out of retained earnings, then our retained earnings have just been overstated for the past 4 years, which is one problem.
Hey, Brian,
Yeah.
I'd like to ask that we take this discussion offline.
Okay.
I don't think the Water Commission was prepared to do a deep dive. I wanted to bring it to our committee's attention and urge that town manager's office with Don Pyatt meet with the commission and untangle this. This is really not our job. It's our interest for sure.
But what I'm about to say, Michael, is our job. Okay. So I appreciate your comment. And your point is noted, and I fully encourage that to happen. And I do encourage the water department and the town to get to the bottom of this. But we as a town, at town meeting, approve 450 of spend for Elm Street. We did not approve 600 of spend for Elm Street. So if there's been, or 650 of spend for Elm Street.
See, but you're guessing right now. You're
I-
trying to do
I've
a
just been told,
forensic,
Mike, I've just been
online.
told, Mike, I've just been told, okay?
but this is an offline discussion, please. You've
How's it
made
an
your-
offline discussion?
Because you're going way down, I'll
Okay,
use the term rabbit hole.
so I'm
so-
going to ask you, Chris, to look into something for me, and I'm going to leave it behind because it's clear we're not going to resolve this tonight, and I don't expect it to be resolved tonight. I'd like to know, and this is a question for you as well, Michelle, on behalf of the town. I'd like to know if we've spent more money on Elm Street than was approved at this town meeting.
Well, did it come at a later town meeting would be my question. And that,
No,
that
no.
I don't have the answer to right
So
now.
that's what I'd like you to look into when you do this meeting and get to the bottom of it. That's my very specific question. That's all I'm asking.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been on
Okay.
that hunt as well. I had a brief meeting, unfortunately, with Corey and Don last week. And we're getting closer to
Okay.
that answer. The meeting just had to be cut short on account of my schedule. So it will be followed up on for sure.
Perfect. Is there anything else anyone else would like asked and resolved in terms of this meeting that's going to take place?
Well, the only one I would ask, Chris, is just, is your revenue keeping up with your projection? I guess that would be the key question of all questions.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yes, it is.
Okay, right.
Okay, so there's one item in, well, I guess there are two items in front of us tonight, if I understand it correctly. Circling back to the original asks, and I first of all, Chris, I want to thank you for your willingness to, give us the broader picture, even though that wasn't part of the agenda tonight. We ultimately do need to understand how retained earnings evolve, because that's really the, both the source of all capital funding and a source of all potential risk to the town. So that's why we've done this circuitous discussion. And I think what we're learning is that the retained earnings that we've been talking about for the past few years have been overstated as a result of this error, and it's being resolved, and we're still in a fine place. So that's a good outcome despite the development. And with that context in mind, circling back to the two requests that we're going to see at town meeting, one is for a truck. You said it's for 85,000.
Correct. That's our estimate.
Okay. And, model and exact cost to be determined. Is it your hope that we would vote that this evening, which I'm happy to do, was provided the rest of the committee is happy doing that, and then just leave it to you to figure out what you want? Or do you want to actually go figure out exactly what it is you want and come back with the exact price? I mean, this is your money, fundamentally. Yours being, your department's money. It's not coming out of capital budget. So I'm a little bit
Right.
less.
Yeah,
focused
and
on-
before I answer the question, if I could just respond to a comment you made about the overstated retained earnings.
Sure.
I mean, based on what I have seen, been told, and understand, I have no reason to believe that. And when
Okay.
the town finance department tells me that our retained earnings has been certified, I can
Yes.
only believe that fact.
Understood.
And I have to put faith in the people and the staff that have done the work over the past 4 years or 5 years since things got a little fuzzy, that it's been done right. And whomever certified it did it with accurate information. So, and that's all we can go off going forward is that we have been given this information. It's been vetted, audited, and certified. So we have no reason to believe at this point that anything was done incorrectly or retained earnings aren't as such. However, as you just said, this being the water department's money as an enterprise fund, a self-sufficient enterprise fund, under a lot of scrutiny from different sources, it is extremely distressing when we go out and make the money to earn the money and do everything we can to keep the rates as low as possible, to maintain the system, to put out clean water. And we have less than 100% confidence in finance and accounting. It's like running a business and then not being able to trust what happens when you give the money to accounting. So I know I have to answer for all of the questions that were asked tonight. And to not have the answers is very distressing and a bit frustrating. So I'll kind of leave that there. There's a lot of work to be done to correct some of the things that are happening that have caused these questions. I'll kind of leave it at that. I would request that there is a vote to approve 85,000 for this truck. Again, we haven't finalized the specs on the truck or sourced it, but we do expect to do that within the coming months. The truck does need to be replaced, so we would like to get the approval at town meeting and move forward with it.
Okay, well, certainly the objective is by town meeting. The question is whether or not you wanted us as a committee to vote this tonight. I'm just going to informally poll the committee, if you don't mind, to make sure that we've got sufficient information before letting anyone actually call this to a vote. Because if somebody's uncomfortable, I don't want this to draw a negative vote unnecessarily. I'd rather ask for the data and get the data and give you a unanimous vote at a point in the future. So just quickly, just informally, I'm going to poll the committee. Want to make sure that you're okay, that we have enough information. It's less than we typically have on a truck, but again, this is being funded by their department. And truck is going to their department. So whether the number moves up or down, I'm not sure it changes anything. Susan Franklin, do you feel comfortable moving to a vote at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. We normally have more detailed information, but the circumstances here are different. I'm comfortable.
Okay, Ralph?
Yes, I'm comfortable. Right.
Michael? Michael, you're on mute.
I'm not comfortable. I would like to have an actual number based on an actual model and type. You also encourage the Water Commission to align their purchase with the rest of the town's fleet. So I would like to see that before we go ahead and vote. That said, I would certainly welcome a straw vote to at least encourage Chris that, yes, we support him on the new purchase. But in terms of actual process, I prefer to have something finite, concrete in front of us to vote on.
So let me just make sure I understand this. You'd like to give a sort of a moral thumbs up, but not a formal vote. Is that?
Yes.
Provided we get the data that you're at that.
Right. So when he has a quote or a bid,
okay,
then we can vote, is my opinion. And if others feel, hey, let's go ahead, then I'm willing to go ahead and vote.
Okay. I just want to be respectful to both of you, honestly. Corey? Corey Evans, thoughts?
I mean, I don't love votes that don't mean anything, so I'd rather just move to vote it than have Chris come back. I am not concerned about matching the fleet. We're not a manufacturing line where we're doing the same thing over time. If there's any efficiencies in having a Chevy versus a Ford, the water department needs to buy what they need to buy. And again, we don't have to balance that or anything else. So I don't see any reason not to vote it today and let this keep on going and focus on the other questions that were asked today.
Sounds like we would be 5-0 if we had the data today. But we're probably going to be 4-1 without it, is kind of my read on this.
Chris has to come back anyway. We've got other questions, so let's just vote it down.
Okay.
I just want to put in a thought here that it's really whether or not can they afford what they're actually proposing rather than anything else, because we really don't have direct control over what kind of vehicle or even the cost of it, as long as the retained earnings cover it. In many ways, it is an independent enterprise fund, and I do think their judgment, we have to accept their judgment if the retained earnings are there to accept it. But anyway, I'm just very much more concerned that we're getting, and I don't mind getting into the details, but really it is nice to have them and not necessary, I suspect, in this case, is because our job is different, actually, in this case.
Yeah, our job is different in this case.
I mean, if I may, Brian,
Please.
if Michelle could weigh in on the process where we go from here, because we're not getting far on sourcing a particular truck. I do not have the knowledge of the process in municipal procurement of a vehicle. So Brenda does not know where to turn. We need some input from the town, and we're not getting that. So Michelle, where do we go from here to source
Yep.
a truck?
So I need specifications of what exactly you need for a truck. And I assume it's similar to something you've purchased in the past, but I need, I guess, one of your technicians or someone to outline exactly what's needed. So we get the truck spec'd to your needs. And then we can get a quote. So it's really
So
that
it's-
simple. And then we need
it's-
to know, are you trading in this truck? And if so, are we putting the trade towards the purchase of this truck? Once we have that information, it's really seamless.
Okay, so Brenda hasn't sent that to you yet?
I don't believe I have it.
And how specific do the specs need to be? Because I mean, I've talked about it ad nauseum with them, and I know Brenda knows the information. So how specific does it need to be? I mean, we know we want for utility body, we know the color, we know, the size. So what else do you think you need?
And you know the make and model.
I know what they've requested, but as Brian pointed out, if we want to try to standardize, we'll relook at that. But
Okay, so I mean, as soon as we have it, we can get a formal quote, but as you know, formal quotes are only as good. They only hold them for 30 days. So my recommendation here is $85,000 is more than reasonable for what you're looking for. And this is the conversation I think I had with Brenda. It's more than reasonable for what you're looking for. We just have to figure out the trade-in piece if you're trading in a truck, because that'll reduce the amount. But there's nothing we can really do to move forward until you secure the funds. So we can spec it, we can get a quote, but as we know, those quotes change.
Yeah.
We've had the DPW's quotes change by $20,000 at times. So the $85,000 came from an initial search on the state contract for vehicles. So, I mean, I think that's really where you are right now.
Okay. And Michelle, you did that search, or who did the search? On the
Brenda
state bid?
did. I
Brenda
provided
did
a
on the
link
state bid
and
list.
she did it based on
Okay.
what their needs were.
I mean, yeah. I guess where I'm just stuttering for the moment is that, if the number's, too high, the money's going back to you anyway. It's not that we've taken it away from another department. Here's what I'm going to suggest. In the interest of giving you comfort that you have your vote, okay? I'm going to suggest that we vote this tonight, recognizing that it's probably not going to be unanimous based on what you've already heard. And if you could get us the data and come back, we can probably move it again and revote it prior to this going to print. That may be,
yeah, I'd be happy to come back.
that may be the best of both worlds, because I think in the absence of that data, we're going to end up where we are tonight anyway. So rather than just leaving here with nothing achieved, I'd leave here with approval, but recognition that, this would be a unanimous vote if we had the data.
Brian, I have one question quickly, and Chris,
Sure.
if you don't know, that's fine. But I mean, the only, I guess, one piece of data that Michelle brought up, which is at least substantial, is, I mean, it probably not, is trade-in value, just because we've always been sensitive to fleet creep. So, Chris, are you guys planning on, trading in the existing truck, even if it's worth nothing? You're getting rid of it either way.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's really, that's the big piece that would, the only concern, like what the final number is, Brian, you hit it on the head. They've got the retained earnings to cover it. It's replacing a truck that clearly needs replacing. The details of that are going to change, but I don't think it's going to affect how we would recommend it. So.
Okay.
Okay, so if I can secure an actual quote for a vehicle, is that what would suffice?
Yeah, I think what I'm suggesting is we're going to vote this. Based on the outcome of the vote, you can decide whether or not you want to get the data and come back to us. But having things appear in a warrant as a unanimous vote is always better than a split. Whenever there's a split, there's a potential someone asks a question as to why. So it's always better to have the data. So yeah. With that, I get, unless there are other further comments, questions, I guess I'd entertain a vote on this.
Well, you need a motion, I guess, don't you?
Yep.
Okay.
So I'd entertain a motion for a vote on this. Thank you, Ralph. You're correct.
Okay. Well, then I move that $85,000 be appropriated from retained earnings for the purposes of purchasing a truck for the water department.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. We'll do a roll call vote. Susan Franklin,
Susan Franklin, I.
Ralph Dormitzer,
Ralph Dormitzer, aye.
Corey Evans,
Corey Evans, aye.
Brian Host, aye, and Michael Dick. Michael, you're on mute.
I abstain.
Okay. Okay. So Chris, thank you for your patience as we sort through this. I guess the message that you're probably taking away from this is we always like to vote on specific things as opposed to conceptual things. If you can come back to us with the data, we can revote it, but you don't have a negative vote at this point. So you've got a 4 in favor and 1 abstention. You've got what you need to purchase the truck.
Okay.
Okay. And then the other item on the, but if you come back, we will certainly revote it. And the other item is the other item on the warrant, which is what? It's a transfer of retained earnings to pay off a note.
Correct. So 2 notes. It would be actually two bond anticipation notes who have a principal balance and interest. So that would come from retained earnings.
Okay. To Michael's point, I don't think we know enough about this to even know what happened or what we're fixing. So my head hurts thinking about voting it because I'm not sure what we're voting or if it's even a capital item. But certainly the source of this issue was a prior capital article. So I'm certainly going to pull the rest of the committee, but in a moment. But my preference would be to get to the bottom of this and have you report back to the committee. And if there's something that we actually have to vote on, we'll vote on it. And hopefully we can do that in plenty of time for the warrant. Michelle, what actually is going to appear in the warrant here? It's just a transfer of retained earnings
It'll be a transfer, yes.
to repay a note, which I don't think we've ever seen before. I've never seen that in over 10 years on the committee.
And just to throw a caveat in there that does need to be addressed. I believe the action item was with Corey as of last week, but
Yeah.
the bonds actually, or the notes actually mature May 31st. So they need to be paid off by May 31st or they renew for 1 year. Because this vote is until the 2nd or 6th or whatever it is in June. So that is a wrinkle that needs to be addressed. And, obviously before May 31st. So if it's not authorized to come from retained earnings, it needs to come from somewhere on May 31st.
Chris, what's the magnitude? Do you have any idea of the size of this? Yeah.
So there's 2, Ralph. There's 2 notes, and the total amount to be paid off is $479,000.
That's tough. That's gonna be tough. Be tough to find that money. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's I'm not even sure it's legal to find that money.
Yeah,
Advisory could do it probably. Right.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, Corey. The only person that you could do it is you could potentially, strike a deal with advisory to get emergency funding to deal with this, and then repay them as you would.
And if it saves us $30,000, it's probably a good reason to do it.
Yeah.
do they have that kind of money left in
No,
their
I don't think so.
reserves?
Not that I'm aware of.
What have they, I mean, they had close to 1 million a couple of years ago. I haven't
Well,
tracked
the,
it. So I
the
don't know.
general stabilization fund is very large, but the emergency stabilization fund, I think you're right. I think it's been cannibalized by like police overtime or something.
And I don't think it rolls over year to year. I could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't roll over. So they have 200,000 each year, something like that.
Yeah, I think it's only $250,000.
250, right?
Okay.
Right.
So the only place you could really go is the general stabilization fund, which actually you can't even hit without a vote.
Well, that's a tough one to get to. That's tough.
You can't get to it without a town meeting vote.
Yeah.
Chris, we're thinking out loud here, but I'm kind of stumped. I don't know if
Oh,
anyone.
I
don't
know.
think we can do it. Right.
I know it's
Yeah.
a wrinkle. I mean, the way Don was talking last week, he didn't seem to think it was a major happening, given that it's short term and it's coming from the town.
So the town would essentially pay it off, and you would just pay the town back after the town meeting? Is that?
Well, yes. I mean, it's an accounting entry in reality.
Right.
Yeah.
But yes, that's essentially what would technically need to happen.
Or you could roll it over and do a shorter term bond, right? You could do like a 30-day or something and then pay it off.
If that's possible, but the interest that we're being charged on this is, a lot. So
Real,
we need
yeah.
to avoid that.
Yeah, we're able to do short term debt pretty flexibly. So
I assume that the expense, Chris, was for something that was approved at some point. Is that correct? By town meeting?
Yes.
trying to figure that out.
Okay, well, that simplifies it a lot. Then free cash can be used for it then.
Okay.
But Brian, to your point, yeah, we don't have anything to actually vote on. So no reason we can't, even if we wanted to, do anything here.
And I'm not sure we will have anything to vote on. I mean, we've
Probably
got the original approval.
Yeah, it's not a capital purchase. It's just a transfer from retained earnings at this point.
Yeah, it's just accounting. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
But you've gotten a glimpse into kind of what we're working on from an accounting standpoint. And I am very eager to get some of this stuff cleared up and work with your committee, over the course of the next year or so, because we do have some major capital investments going to happen within the next 5 years, 10 years,
Yep.
To either upgrade or rebuild our water treatment plant. So we need to have all of these financial matters very clear and very straight. And obviously, it's one thing to be doing that going forward, but as we know, what we do now is the result of what we've done over the last 5 years or so. So
Right.
there's a lot being worked on, and we are working on a presentation for advisory and capital. We've just concluded a master plan in conjunction with Woodard and Kern. So they have helped us map out what our options are to modernize our treatment plant, which is an aging plant, almost 50 years old, and is in need of some major capital investment for the long term. So we're working on that. We're putting a presentation together for the appropriate committees in the near future.
Looking forward to it. Chris, just one idea one thought I want to plant as a seed as you sort of look at those major requests and the on the path forward. I seem to recall that we approved some major bonding amounts in the past for I think a multi-million-dollar filtration system, if I'm not mistaken, which doesn't appear to be getting done anytime soon. I just ask you to look at whatever bonding approvals were passed and put out there that have gone unused, and we may want to undo them until such point in time that we actually intend to proceed with the project.
So
just as a housekeeping item.
Yes, and that's been discussed recently. So we have 3.6 million authorized and unissued for GAC filtration. We put the brakes on that because it came in twice as much.
Right.
And we determined it wasn't the best bang for your buck when it came to spending $7 million. So that's when we engaged Woodard and Kern for the master plan. And what we would like to do, we're just not there yet to seek approvals for, is to somehow reappropriate that 3.6 million for GAC and put it towards a complete overhaul of our residuals management area, which is how we manage the sludge that is removed from the byproduct of the treatment process. In the master plan with Woodard and Kern, that's estimated to be about $6 million. We would be completely overhauling that area and creating 3 new lagoons, which is the highest priority when it comes to capital investments in the treatment process right now. So we're just not there yet in terms of asking for that to be reappropriated, but that will likely be how we reallocate that.
So you're going to reappropriate as opposed to undo it and then start fresh.
Yes.
Okay.
That's the idea.
Right.
So, any other questions?
No. Anyone else on the committee have anything else for Chris?
Thanks for digging into all this, Chris. There's a lot there, I know.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah.
Thanks for your time and questions.
Thank you, Chris.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks for your service.
All righty. Thanks.
All right. So that is water. Next on the agenda is sewer. Michelle, do we have anything coming in from sewer or anyone joining us this evening?
You do. Paul Kearse is here
Great.
representing sewer.
All right. Paul, thanks for your patience, first of all.
I'm hoping you're worn out.
Oh, no, we're just warmed up. So
Thank
what's
you.
on the plan?
So I'm here for sewer, and also if you have the ban for Milder Affairs on the agenda, I believe you had like a update on all capital request vote that was going to be on at 7. So I'm just looking for a positive outcome on that. Our new wheelchair van arrived this week, so things are in motion. So on sewer, we should have 2 items on the warrant. One of them is a grant that I think Brian Joyce submitted to go on the warrant. I'm hoping you have that. It's a $225,000 grant in which the state will pay $135,000, and then sewer has to match that with $90,000. And it's an asset management plan is what's going to come out of that. So similarly, our plant is almost 50 years old as well. We are in the process of a grant that had been already approved to assess the whole facility on its utility side, which is all of the electrical, IT, and processes that occur down there. So that evaluation should be wrapping up, and we should have a good report, probably right after Labor Day, that kind of give us that aspect of where the facility is. This one here is on all the mechanical side of the facility. So this is the structure, and all of the capital equipment that's in there, and where that is. As you know, we've had a situation with membranes failing within the warranty period, and we've been spending all of our time this last year and a half working that solution and kind of getting our remedy in place, and that's going to be part of our plan moving forward. Once we understand where this grant gets approved, we'll be able to tie that into the assets of the facility, along with the membrane kind of replacement plan. So it's not just a corrective action for us, it's a preventive action moving forward as to how we want to rotate these membranes every 7 years or 10 years or whatever the number is going to be. So that is one item. So that money we would that 90,000, we're more than likely going to pull that out of the retained earnings. Michelle would have the balance of retained earnings for me. The other one, we originally had a placeholder for this grit screw screening system for 350,000, and the quote just came in about a week ago. We were chasing them for a requote. It's 435,000, but we're looking to allocate 500,000 total, because what's not included in there is the install. And so I met with Michelle this morning to review our financials, and we determined that we would like to allocate the 500,000, but we're going to finance that over 5 years. So that'll go on to the debt service schedule.
Paul, does that become a specific motion that we need to make for that purpose? Is that what you're asking?
Yes. I don't know how Michelle would have to help me understand the financing side of it, because it's not going to go against any one of our funds that I'm aware of. So,
But the debt service would.
the debt service is, yeah.
Okay, so Paul, let me just make sure I understand this. We approved 350 at a prior town meeting, and that was supposed to be both the capital spend, but it was going to be funded out of retained earnings, or was it going to be funded with debt?
So I wasn't aware of the prior approval. That's
Oh,
why.
okay, so we've
Yeah, there
never,
was no prior, yeah, there's
maybe
no
I
prior
misunderstood.
approval.
I apologize.
Yeah, no, we didn't get it approved at all. We had Carol, our clerical assistant, who's new to the sewer, was unfamiliar with the process of getting information to the town hall so that we can get this on the warrant. So we believe there's a placeholder there in the warrant for which we originally put in a placeholder for 350. We actually need that money needs to be 500. And then there should also be one in there for the grant. The grant has to be funded 225 for the total, and then the state gives us the 135, and we pay the balance of 90.
Okay, I misunderstood when you said there was a placeholder. I, for some reason, have heard of this grit screw in years past. Are we?
We've talked about it for a long time.
Okay, but
we've been sitting on this.
We've never appropriated it.
So it's a whole screening system. So there may have been a grit screw component of the whole system that would have been replaced. That was, that could have been, 30 or 40,000 about 2 or 3 years ago when I first came on board.
Okay.
But this is what occurred, when we had the failing membrane systems. So it was an evaluation of the whole system. At that time, about a year ago, we did receive a quote, but our time was spent solving the issues with the membrane. We wanted to make sure that we weren't just going to replace something for 435,000 if that wasn't the issue that was causing the membrane failure. So it's kind of a combination of areas where, once we looked at the system, that's kind of driving that whole process. It is aged to the point where it needs to be replaced. And we figured this is the time to do it since we're replacing the membranes at the same time. So.
Okay. So the ask is going to be 500. Okay. And it sounds like we're in the process of planning to replace all the membranes as well. Is the thought still that that's going to be either warranty, or is that another source of funds that we have available?
No, so,
Or is that not for public discussion, given a potential conflict with the vendor, which I respect?
no,
if that's the case?
yeah, we've had a few executive meetings to discuss the warranty, which we, came to some resolution with the vendor.
Okay,
So we are, in a position to be able to replace, there's two sections of membranes. One of them completely failed, the other one is working. So, the one that completely failed, will be having that replaced. And there won't be a need for any additional funding beyond what we have to do that. And we're exercising the warranty, and we're working with them to cover the certain expenses of getting it here and getting it installed.
okay. Sorry, I'm just gonna drill a little bit deeper here. I'm not really sure we have ever approved monies to replace the membranes since the last big go round. Is it fundamentally they're replacing them and we're just gonna pay for shipping, or what?
That's basically what it boils down to. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I just wanted to understand. And the second set of membranes is still working and appears
Correct.
to be tracking to a relatively normal life cycle.
That's what we believe, which is why we want to put this system in, this
Okay,
screening system. Yeah. So once that's in, our plan is to not replace both at the same time. So we were getting a whole new set of membranes in for the replacement of one side. The other side is still under warranty and will remain there. So what our plan is to do is to rotate one side versus the other, off schedules of, every 5 to 7 years, whatever is recommended when we go through this grant.
makes sense. So that you've always got a set that's in the first 7 years of their life, and you've always got a set that's in the second set of 7 years.
Correct.
Okay,
That's the plan.
yeah, makes sense. It certainly mitigates, catastrophic across the board failure. So that's smart. Okay, and do we have the financials that would allow us to contemplate a $500,000 bonding? So specifically, do we have financials that give us our current retained earnings position as well as our sort of future expected, revenues, free cash flows, and debt service, so that we just can get comfortable that in fact we can cover that debt?
But we do. So, to Michael Dick's point earlier, we've had a disconnect on the financial reporting with the town as well.
Okay,
It seems to be kind of a systematic issue, or a systemic issue, I would say, with water and sewer. There's been obviously some disconnect with employees coming and going.
understood.
That's really what it boils down to. We've had an employee who was with us for a long time, and she moved over to the assessor's office. So trying to replace people, and we had a very strong advocate, John Beck, for a long time, who really was on top of this. So Michelle has been extremely helpful, identifying what it is we need to review on a monthly and quarterly basis as far as reports go. And so we're in pretty good shape there. We, as you know, the last 2 years, we've had 2 major sewer projects, which were funded by the property owners, and one of them being Cook Estate, one of them being 380, 390, and 400 CJC, better known as the Stop and Shop Plaza. Both of those are financed over 20 years, so we'll be collecting that revenue over 20 years, somewhere around $100,000 a year total. But Michelle can answer your question specifically about stabilization fund and retained earnings. She should have the balance.
We don't have the balance right yet. I was working on that spreadsheet today, Paul, and got distracted.
No problem.
But I can send that to everybody tomorrow so they can review it. But you are in a favorable place. I just can't give the exact amount right now.
So Michelle, what we fundamentally, and others on the committee, please feel free to please chime in if I miss something. But I think what we need is we need the current retained earnings. We need current balance of any capital stabilization fund, so sewer capital stabilization fund to the extent they've got one. And then we need some forecast that's going to show how we're, tracking in terms of revenue, forecasted free cash flow, and the ability to service both the debt that we have in place already, plus this incremental debt. That's really what it comes down to. We need to make sure that they cover their debt one way or another, whether it's coming out of their earnings
Sure.
or whether it's doing.
And we'll be able to provide that.
Okay.
They have a mechanism to track everything, their spend throughout the year.
Okay. And but that was just me thinking off the top of my head. I just want to ask other committee members, what else do people feel like they need to see in order to vote this?
So this amount doesn't include any amount for the warranty membrane. It's not a case where we have to buy the membrane and then we get reimbursed, Paul.
No,
All right, thanks.
I guess, Paul, for me, it would be kind of projecting out the numbers you need really for membranes, the grid screw, any other expenses you can, maybe 5 years for your own benefit, not necessarily for ours, but for everyone's benefit, just to make sure that either retained earnings or other sources actually, or just revenue, are going to cover all of those things, particularly when you talk about $6 million for the plant, which is a really substantial number. I guess it's just making sure that the future looks okay, basically.
yeah, we are in agreement there. We've been aggressively talking about this with Michelle and Carol to a certain extent over the last couple of months. So we've been getting various levels of reports, and we've got a consolidated spreadsheet for us to be able to do projections, and not just projections on the revenue side, but also the cash flow projections.
Right.
As these things come up. So we're in good shape. I mean, just in the stabilization fund alone is about 1.5 million. That I know off the top of my head. So, but we'll get that information to you tomorrow. I just want to make sure we had an article in the warrant that covers the 500 and also the 225 grant.
So Paul, you do have 2 placeholders for
Okay.
those amounts. We'll make sure we get the information to this committee so they can vote them.
Awesome.
Okay. And Paul, is the grant competitive, or is the grant like apply and provide the match and you get it?
Apply and get the match, you get it. Yeah.
Okay. So really we're appropriating 90 matching funds for your grant program. Okay.
Correct. Yeah. So this should wrap up the kind of the holistic view of that facility.
Okay. Right. Okay. I was indirectly asking, whether or not we're going to be on the hook for the full 225 if the grant source doesn't come through. And the answer, what I'm hearing pretty clearly is no. I think.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. So the appropriation there's 90. So 90 plus 500. Okay. Anything else from the committee that we'd like to see before we pick this back up? Michael, did you have any thoughts, suggestions? I think everyone else is. Or Susan?
No, this is very straightforward, and you should proceed.
Okay, great.
Keep it simple.
Thank you.
Super. So that's, I think that wraps us up for water and sewer.
Do we need to vote it?
Sorry?
Do we need to vote it?
That's a great question, Corey. We can certainly vote I think we're certainly in position to vote the first one. Does anyone disagree with, or does everyone agree that's a logical thing to do? Thumbs up?
Yeah, in particular, I think you've got, if retained earnings you've got a stabilization of 1.5 million. I don't know what your retained earnings are, but you certainly have the money. So.
Yeah, is that a real number, Paul, at 1.5?
Oh yeah, it is. Yes. That's on a fresh town report received this morning at 9:26 a.m. from Michelle.
Okay,
Now, the only question would be, is this 90,000 coming out of stabilization and or is it coming out of retained earnings? And the same question would be applied to the 500,000, even though it's a borrowing article. Nevertheless, you just have to state how it's going to be funded and from what source. So that's all.
Right, so, we have to just confirm that with Michelle. I would believe, once we get the retained earnings number from her, I believe it'll come from retained earnings.
Yes.
Because the debt service will be fairly low on a quarterly basis, and the 90,000, obviously, I don't know what the term is for the 90. It's going to be paid out over a year, I think. Or, when the report's completed or something. So,
Mhm.
yeah, retained earnings is where it would be.
okay. Paul, and I didn't mean to doubt the retained earnings number. You sort of tossed it out as a tentative number that you were going to get confirmation tomorrow. That sounds like that's actually a real number based on a report. And Michelle, you concur that is retained earnings is 1.5 million. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think just a little shy, right, Paul?
Okay.
Is that retained earnings or stabilization? Which is it?
Retained earnings.
Is retained earnings. Okay.
And do we have a sewer capital stabilization fund in addition to the 1.5 million of retained earnings?
There is, I don't know how much is in there, because I believe the reason that fund was initially started, and Paul, maybe I'm wrong, was to
Was-
pay for membranes over time.
Yeah, it was. And I think we pumped it up with money and then we spent it, and it may have about a new balance coming, but yeah, that's for membrane cycles. Okay. So we shouldn't be looking at that as a source, period, is what you're saying for this. Okay. Okay, I'm okay unless anyone objects. Or has further questions with regards to the 90 match. I'd entertain a motion.
Okay, then I'll move that 90,000 be appropriated for an asset management plan from the sewer department's retained earnings.
All right. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Corey and Ralph. We'll do a roll call vote.
Aye.
Susan Franklin,
Susan Franklin, I.
Ralph Dormitzer,
Aye.
Michael Dick,
Michael Dick, aye.
Corey Evans,
Corey Evans, aye.
and Brian Host, aye. Okay, so the 90 is the 90 match is approved or recommended, I should say, by capital budget. 5-0. And moving on to the grit screw, 500,000. Do people feel like given this is going to bonding, do we feel like we need to see those numbers, or are people comfortable just relying on the retained earnings balance?
I mean, the only question is Paul, is timing, benefits to doing it now versus later, those sorts of things, not that it really matters, but just give us a sense of benefits of getting this done now versus saving up some money and reducing the debt load.
The facility is kind of at a somewhat of a critical point here because of the membrane failure has identified a few weaknesses, and this is one of them. They said if we spent no money over the next 5 years, this would be the only thing to spend it on.
Okay, and it's
this is what Woodard and Carnes' advice was, to quickly do it. We held off on it this past year, which they wanted us to go ahead and spend the money last year. We didn't, so.
Okay.
And a healthy grid screw, does that impact how well the membranes function? Is this also protecting the other asset that we have?
Yeah, so the way that it works is there's several grinding and filtering operations that go through, right? So this is kind of one of the key ones that's there prior to hitting the membranes. So if this is not working efficiently, what happens is more effluent gets into the membranes, and the membranes can't filter it properly because it's not been through the system very well. So it's kind of a key element for us.
All right, yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
And Paul, what was the without leading the witness or expressing a view, frankly, what was the logic behind bonding this as opposed to paying for it out of retained earnings?
Um, we want to make sure that we kind of hold a somewhat of a good balance in retained earnings right now, until these two grants wrap up. We have the recommendations are going to come from the grant on the utility side. Everyone's talking about tidal waves coming into the harbor, right? And we're in the harbor, so what's the cost to raising all the electrical work up 15 feet above sea level, as opposed to where it is now. Part of that report also, we've got a portable office unit over there that has to be replaced and restructured somehow as well, according to this report. Then we're going to have this other report on the rest of the mechanical side of the plant. So we'd rather hold our cash as long as we can. And, if we can, the financing of this works out well. Like I said, in the back of our mind, we have roughly 100,000 coming in every year from the financing we did for the two properties I mentioned. So we're kind of comfortable with that.
Okay. Bottom line, you've got a lot of uncertainty regarding your capital spend looking forward. So you'd rather sit on a larger cushion and
Correct.
incur a little bit more interest to maintain that flexibility.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. All right.
Makes sense.
Anyone else have questions for Paul? Does anyone object to the idea of voting this without seeing additional numbers, or do people feel like they have what they need based on the retained earnings and the idea that we're bonding this to protect those retained earnings for future flexibility?
All that makes.
I was going to say is you need to have some way to have a motion. We don't really have a number to put down against it right now, so it's a little harder to write the motion. You can probably write a motion that will work here, but it isn't clear to me how you do that.
Well, do we have a number? I mean, is the number 500, Paul, or is the number still moving around?
No, it's 500.
So it would be like a motion to approve spending of $500,000 for a grid screw to be bonded over a period of 5 years, I guess. Is that how we should phrase it?
Paul, was that?
Is it
Yes.
Okay. Corey?
So moved.
No. Okay. So Corey has moved the motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. We'll do a roll call vote. In counterclockwise order. Susan Franklin.
Susan Franklin, aye.
Ralph Dormitzer.
Ralph Dormitzer, aye.
Michael Dick.
Mike Dick, aye.
Brian Host. Sorry, Corey Evans.
Corey Evans, aye. Ralph, sorry for stealing your motion.
and Brian Host, aye. Okay, so you've got a 5-0 recommendation from Capital Budget, Paul.
Thank you for all your support. I greatly appreciate it.
Well, thanks for your
Thank you
patience again.
again, Paul. Right.
No
Thanks for
problem.
walking through it.
I'm actually still at work, so I'll be driving home, but you will be getting to the van tonight?
I doubt I mean, look, I'm going to defer to the committee ultimately, but I put vote on this agenda so that we have the legal opportunity to vote, but not the obligation. I don't think we're going to be voting the entire slate of projects tonight. In fact, I doubt we'll be voting any of them until we have the whole slate worked out.
Okay.
But that's my guess.
Okay, then
and that's just one thought.
that's thank you for that. I'll move on, but
Okay. But as long as I have you, we do have this list we're going to spend a little bit of time with. It's getting late, but I just want to make sure I've got the right numbers in this list. And your vans were among the numbers that on the list were wrong because they were not net of the trade-in. So we had the transport vehicle at 50 and the caravan at 42. I don't know, Michelle, if you've updated these numbers already. But I remember we were getting 30 to 35 back on each of the two vans that we were going to trade in, if I recall correctly, and the net request was dramatically lower. Where are we? Elder?
So the net was going to be 30. Because remember, we still have 32 or 35 that we owe you from the original 66 we got. That's why.
Okay, so it's gonna be. Okay, so it's gonna be funded with the proceeds of the grant that we got back from the last van.
Right.
Plus the trade-ins.
Correct.
Okay,
You gave us 66
yeah,
for a deposit. We only used like 30.
okay, you only use 30, so we're gonna
Something
repurpose
like
that. We're fundamentally gonna repurpose that, what we're gonna do.
Correct.
Okay,
And we're asking for the additional 30 to cover the deficit when we purchase the 350 van and the minivan.
okay, so the net is 30, it's not 92. Is that,
I would
correct?
yield to Michelle. I don't know. She's been, they've been getting quotes on the vans. And one they've already sold basically. So we already have that number. We know the second van might be closer to 40,000, which we had an offer on.
Right, so the only thing I can say here is, yes, you will reduce the transport vehicle from 50. You can reduce that, you can cut it in half to 25. I just think we have to be really careful because we may have to do some outfitting to these vans. We don't want to sell ourselves short. And we're assuming that the car market's going to stay as strong as it has been for that other van. We can't trade that in until we actually receive a new van. So we just have to make sure that we're covering ourselves in the event that something happens with the trade-in value, not getting the trade-in value for the second van that we anticipate. The first one's been bid. That's a solid number. They're holding that number until town meeting, so I'm not worried about that one. It's the second van that I have a little angst about, just because of timing. But I do think this transport vehicle, Paul, you're right, we can reduce that down to 25,000. And wait, oh, wrong one, sorry. This is why I should wear glasses. Okay.
and we also still have money to release from the prior.
We do.
Right, these are gross numbers, right? So we've got two trade-ins plus money from the grant to offset this.
Correct. So this transport vehicle without any trade-in is upwards of, if I'm not mistaken, $89,000,
Oh, okay.
fully outfitted.
Okay. So that's why. Okay. It's not a $50,000 van. Okay, so when you're dropping this down to 25, you're including both of the trade-ins at roughly 30 plus whatever was left, the 20 some odd from the
Yes,
grant. Is
exactly.
that accurate?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so we leave the caravan in at 42.
Yes.
Okay, and the transport comes down to 25.
Yep.
Okay. Sorry, just trying to squeeze all this.
No, it's
Makes sense.
It's a long list and it doesn't fit currently. So,
I hear you.
50 here, 50 there, it adds up.
But during our last meeting, when you voted, or we presented, you had asked that we let you know where we are, if it gets tight. But so we did receive the state wheelchair van. That was the big six-figure van. So that just arrived last week. So that's here, and we'll be getting that fitted out and hopefully start to use that in about a week or two.
Okay.
And then, like we said, we sold one white van, but they're not taking possession of that quite yet. I believe it's the same person we're getting the 350 van from.
Okay.
So it's a dealership. So we're going to buy the new 350 from him at the 90,000, and sell him the other van for the 31 or 35, whatever it is.
Okay.
And then once that occurs, then we can go sell the other white van and get the minivan.
Okay. But after all those moving pieces, we can drop the 50 to 25 because some of that was already baked in for Michelle. So,
Yes.
okay. Got it.
Awesome.
Does anyone have anything else for Mr. Curious before we let him
I've
go?
got a random one because Paul, I know you guys use one of the Nissan electric cars for some transportation. So I was just going to ask Michelle where we were on those leases, because I'm just wondering if you guys are going to be a vehicle short once we have to give those back.
Nope, so we bought them, Corey.
Yeah, they bought them a couple years ago. The leases were up. The leases were,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
I thought we
think-
released a new set. Okay, we bought them. I apologize. My memory's wrong.
Nope, you're correct. We released a new set and then those leases rolled off and we purchased them.
All right. Time flies when you're having fun. Sorry. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, anything else for Paul? All right, thanks so much, Paul.
Thank you, guys. Take care. Have a good evening.
You too.
Thanks, Michelle.
Good night, Paul.
Thank you.
All right. And so just wanted to give people a quick inventory of where I think we are on this list. And we should also talk about what items we need to spend more time vetting before we feel like we might be able to vote these. Michelle, if you could just scroll down a little bit. We were at 2050 at the bottom of the, now we're at 2105, so something changed. Okay, not sure what, but the spreadsheet I had was at 2050, so this went up by 50 grand somewhere. Just looking at this list, I had a bunch of notes in terms of items that I think we were able to reduce, and I just wanted to speak out loud and see if others on the committee and you, Michelle, had heard the same thing so that we could update this. And I'm just glancing down to see where this 50 came from. So first question, Michelle, do you know where the incremental 50 is? I'm trying to spot it.
So we have the replacement of patron computers from the library. That's the addition, that's 27,000. Oh, well, I'm sorry. So if you want to look here, sorry. So here we have town hall sprinkler design, $45,000.
That was not on the last one.
That was not, so what we did is we took off what was on the last one, which was a temporary lease for town hall. And then I think there may have been moving expenses on the last one. What we did here is we put in what the select board's last iteration was, which was to get an estimate on the roof, an estimate on windows, and estimate on design work for the sprinklers. So those have all been layered in here. So that's probably where your delta is.
Yeah, I'm shocked that this is only went up by 50 grand since the last go round. There had to have been other moving pieces because I'm just looking at the windows alone are 650 and the temporary space was 225.
Let's make sure it's calculating
okay.
correctly. It may not be calculating correctly.
Yeah, that's possible too.
And there you go. It's not.
Yeah.
Yep.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, I knew something was wrong there. Okay.
How do we even move forward with these new big asks for town hall?
Well, here's what I'd
Michelle,
like to. Let me make a suggestion. Let's just quickly go through these and see if any of these, if we agree with the numbers where they stand right now. I had a handful from the last spreadsheet that I had hand marked, and I want to see if what we as capital or I as one member of capital heard was the right number, and that number is now reflected on this current spreadsheet. So the temporary lease space is gone. The transport vehicle that's in at 50 should come down to 25, right? And this is Elder Affairs, the transport vehicle. You've got that down to 25 already. We're going to leave the 42 in for the caravan. The bus lease was in at 150 on the last one. That should be down to 90. Yeah. The electric bus lease, what we heard is that, we appropriated 25 last year, but the bus has not gone into service yet. So 3/4 of the 25 grand that we appropriated as special town meeting is still sitting there. So we should,
Correct.
sorry, go on.
No, I said that's correct.
Yeah, so we should really only have to appropriate, so a quarter of this has been spent, 3/4 of it should still be sitting there. We should only have to appropriate about another 7 grand to cover fiscal 25, right? 25 divided by 4 is what, 6.25? Yeah, 6.25, $6,250 is for each quarter. And so we should have 18.75. So 18,750 roughly sitting in the account, even after we pay out for April, May, June. So we should only need about another 7 to cover all of fiscal 25. Am I thinking about that the right way, Michelle? Now,
I believe so. I'd have to read through the contract. We did take delivery of the bus.
yeah, I don't know if I assume they pay monthly or quarterly, legally, given that that was a fiscal 24 appropriation. We probably don't want to go through the trouble of like actually reappropriating it. You might want to just prepay the first 3 quarters prior to June 1. I don't know, whatever,
Yeah.
but net to us, we should only be on the hook for another 7 grand to get them through the entirety of fiscal 25. So that's the electric bus, the Chromebook lease. It looked like the materials they sent us, the number should be 51. Yeah, 51,337 based on the lease they sent us for year 3 of 3, which should match out to last year's number. Corey?
Yes.
You had a
Yeah,
comment?
exactly.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm agreeing, but my audio is bad. My apologies.
No, please. I'm just ripping through this out loud. So if anyone has any thoughts or comments, and that's kind of all I had with regards to numbers that needed to change. That's all I caught. There may be.
And you mean that the other things are things that we haven't nailed down yet, or they're still in flux? What do you mean by that's all the things?
Well, some of them are still in flux. Like I know we have questions on a bunch of the school requests. I mean, we could quickly as a group eye down this now and perhaps say, okay, what do we still need to discuss and resolve sort of information gaps before we're going to be comfortable voting?
Got it.
Some of it's already voted, so you know. And I guess those are the highlighted numbers. So those are off. Maybe we can shade these, into different categories. We either have the information, don't have the information, or it's already voted. So middle high school farm system fire alarm. I think does anyone feel like let me ask the negative. Does anyone feel like we do not, that like we need more information? Let's ask it that way. And then we'll just chip down this list. I'm not going to roll call vote everybody, but I'm going to go through these one by one. If somebody says I need more information, then let's talk about it. Okay, but let's start with number 1, the fire alarm engineering study.
Doesn't it occur to you that 175,000 just to do a study is a very big number? I mean,
yeah, it does.
Just for heaven's sakes, I mean, that seems absurd. Maybe I'm missing something, but
You're not. So the numbers are really high, but they're typically 10%. What you allocate is 10% of what you think the entire project cost will be. So we'll have to ask Nick to get the actual number from the company, but I think that's what they gave them as a placeholder.
wow.
And it's also an enormous building. What was the square footage on that thing again? I mean, it really is.
It's like 225,000 square feet.
You're right. This isn't a town hall. This isn't even Osgood. I mean, this thing is enormous.
But Ralph and like all of us, we should be real, right? Like, so the whole project was in the AI3 report is 500 grand, right? Soup to nuts. Engineering through implementation. Then you actually go out and like ask somebody, or try to hire somebody to do this. They immediately come in, they inflate it by 3x, and they charge you 10% up front.
That's right. That's right.
This is it's just how this goes. Now, I don't know how to break this, but it is, I shouldn't say break it. It's already broken. I don't know how to fix it. How about that?
It's
Um,
government spending at its finest.
Yeah, just it just boggles the mind. I know the building is large, but the 175,000 to figure out where you're going to place a bunch of detectors and some wiring seems like a almost trivial on a CAD system. You could probably do it in 5 hours. I mean, it's not that tough. But anyway, that's my view. Sorry.
this is a senior engineer for an entire year of their time. That's what 175 maps out to, right?
Amazing. Imagine spending that amount of time to lay something out on a CAD system. Shakers. It's not realistic. But anyway, there's nothing I can do about it. I'm telling you, just you wouldn't do that for yourself, for sure.
Oh, I see. That's that's for sure.
Yeah, Brian, your numbers aren't quite right, because if you also consider all the carrying costs for said engineer, he's much more than 175. But that's neither here nor there.
Yeah. So, do we want Nick to press on this number, or
Sure, of course.
We already asked him to.
okay?
This is still a number that is not nailed down.
Okay.
The last, when he was before us, he said, we're not sure how we can proceed. We
Okay.
have to do some more review before we really know. So
So
this
that's a
is
yellow.
still-
Maybe make that
That's
a
a
yellow.
placeholder.
Yeah, maybe make that spill it
And I
yellow.
would ask, what other placeholders are in there? So we're not wasting our time debating placeholders.
So I think, so that's an interesting question, only because there are a lot of placeholders until we go out to bid. These,
Then I don't want to debate a placeholder right now. We've already
you're-
discussed them.
Yeah,
Okay.
the
And
point
found
isn't to
out that
debate
they're
them, Michael. The
placeholders.
point is to flag them.
All right, then flag them as placeholders and move
Yeah,
on.
the point was, let's move down the list and flag what still requires work. It wasn't to debate these tonight. So we're on to number 2, because every time we flag, we seem to debate, and then we debate whether or not we're flagging or debating, but let's just go down the list. Parker Ave, do we need more information on either of those 2 requests? Anyone? That would be a no. Okay, so those are green. Unless you just want to leave them white, which is fine too. Make them green. That means it's done. It's a green light. Okay. Simple enough. Level 3 charging stations. That is okay.
We need more on that.
Okay, that's yellow. What do we need, Corey? Not to debate it, but what's the request?
Request is, well, Nick's got to come back with location information, final cost, and then we also need to discuss long-term financing of maintenance and repair. I think we're pretty close to those, but just to get a final number on, the concern being, we don't want these to cost us a lot of money in the long term or be some sort of, vampire drain.
Yeah. Are you in discussion with him? Does he know those requests are outstanding, or do you want to shoot him an email?
Yeah, I'll talk to him. I talk to Nick regularly, so I'll
Okay.
include that in my conversations. I meant to bring it up last time, but there were other stuff they
Okay.
were talking about. So.
At this point, I just want to give him a list he can check off, because we're at that point in the process. Okay, the library patron computers. My recollection was you were going to talk to Ron Menard about that.
yep, so Megan's been in contact with Ron. She's waiting for additional information. She should have that next week.
Okay, so that's a yellow. Okay, and that's in process. We don't need to chase anybody. Okay. And next is the electronic parking and RTF enforcement. Do we need more information on that?
Can I provide some information?
Sure, please.
So we had to go to advisory for that request for funding because our system was becoming obsolete. There was no contact with the current vendor, and the police they were having difficult times processing tickets, processing information. So they said this was an emergency need, because at the end of the year, they'll have nothing, and the lead time to get something up and running is significant. So they went to advisory for this request.
Okay.
That's just a little background, but Bill will be able to fill you in more.
Okay. And advisory funded it?
They did.
Okay. Okay, so then the question is advisory can ask for their money back, so we may still see this request. And advisory funded it out of what? Out of the emergency, the advisory emergency fund, or out of the, I guess it had to be.
Yeah,
Okay,
yep. So I'm gonna put this as yellow.
okay. Well, when they see what we're dealing with, they may not ask for their money back. We'll see. Okay, the taser lease program, do we need any more information? Okay, that's a green.
Green. That's a green.
26-ton service lift. Anyone need anything else?
I'm sorry, the taser lease program, I think you already funded. You
You
voted
think-
that.
Oh, we already voted that. You're right.
Yep,
You're absolutely right. Sorry, my mistake.
That's okay.
So the RTF scale. Anybody need anything else there? Okay, that's a green. 26-ton service lift. Anyone need anything else there? It's a green. Command vehicle. Oh, sorry, the dump truck. 175. Anyone? Green. Okay, command vehicle's already voted. Town hall roof estimate, that's a yellow. Sprinkler design upgrades, yellow, yellow. Okay. And then the transport vehicle. So the two elder affairs vehicles, anyone need anything else on that? Those are green. The HVAC system is, Nick told us the number's 400. Okay, does anyone need anything further on that? It's a green. Repaving,
What's the HVAC system for?
that is a replacement of the entire split system at the Elder Affairs building
At Wilcott, yeah.
at Wilcott.
Okay.
And Ralph, if you want more on that, you
No,
can-
no, no, I don't need more. I just want to know
Okay.
what it was. That's a very big number for split system, I'll tell you. But
Well, it's the
anyway,
entire building, yeah. And
Yeah,
it's,
so-
well, it's both the split system and all the head, it's both the compressors and all the heads, but all the lines, believe it or not. Which is a story unto itself.
Mhm.
Okay, so 100 Sawyer Street is what?
That is the recreation parking lot.
Am I just drawing it, having a blank moment here? I don't really remember discussing that.
You haven't heard it yet.
You did it.
Okay, all right, so that's a yellow.
Yep. And if
need to hear it flat
anyone
out. It's
sees
not just
Michael
follow,
come back
that's-
in, Michael fell off, so I want to make sure that we see if he comes back in.
Okay,
Thank you, Michelle.
bus lease at 90, anyone? That's a green. Electric bus lease at 7, anyone? That's a green.
We just gotta get a final number on that, which Michelle, you can math for us, right?
I can, yes.
Okay, and then
Question on
the
Question on the
Chromebook-
bus lease, okay, all right. The electric bus lease, the only question on the electric bus lease is what are remember last time we talked about it was the conditions associated with actually use of an electric bus. I don't know that that's, because I haven't been around enough, but that was a big issue that stopped the actual previous potential leasing of an electric bus from last year. So there was a really set of conditions. I don't know if that applies to this one or not. So
It's the same bus, Ralph. This is just year 2 of the lease, or well, this is, I should say this is the next 12 months of the lease.
Huh.
It's
that's what
20,
stopped it last time, but anyway, okay.
no, it's 20, your recollection is correct. It's 25 a year, but the bus isn't showing up until now. So we're only gonna, so we appropriated 25 for a full 12 months in fiscal 24, but we're only gonna spend, basically, less than 7 of it. So the rest of it rolls over to cover 25 and we just have to plug the gap of 7.
Okay, but I wasn't pointing at that. What I pointed out was that there were a series of conditions associated with the actual use of the bus, which made it impractical for us to have it. But anyway, maybe that's all been resolved. I don't know. That's all.
So Ralph, you
Yeah.
are correct, and I'm sorry, Corey.
No, go ahead, Michelle. Do you go?
I was gonna say, the AEC through Tanya Bojel actually worked through all of those challenges. And I think I think we're in a pretty good spot.
Okay.
So the Chromebook lease, that's just third year. You might want to change the title of that to just say, you know, Chromebook lease, year 3 of 3.
Well, and on that point, if there's, I mean, as we go in the future, can we have like the flag for recurring costs? Just, you know,
just
little R column or something, that way we can just push it
Sure.
out of the bottom.
just remove the replacement of, just say Chromebook lease. So that we year 3 of 3, and that way you know where you know it's a lease, and you know what year, how long the lease is, and what year you're in. Okay, so hopefully that helps us. And then replace all projectors. That's a yellow. I think we still need to go through the numbers there. Red Cat's not on. Finish retiling. Does anyone retiling? Any further questions on retiling? Or are we good? That's a green.
I'm good.
Okay. Furniture's any questions on the furniture? It's just another year. It's a green. Okay.
Can we yellow that one first? I don't want to get into it now, but just yellow it.
The furniture or the new Chromebooks?
The furniture and the Chromebooks, but we're not there yet.
Okay, so those are both yellow.
Yep.
Okay. Do you want to chase me offline, Corey, and just let me know what your thoughts on the furniture? I thought that was kind of more of a recurring program at this point. So,
yeah, it's not so much the request as it's the execution strategy.
Okay.
So this is not to doubt the request or that it's needed. Just
Okay.
Thoughts on how it's done.
Give me a shout. Then we'll try and get it over to Lance as well. The athletics vans, that's a yellow. We still need to vet that. The numbers there. The safety of the buildings, we voted down. You can make that a red. And I think that's it. Total voted 166. I'm not sure what that number is, but it's probably messing up your total.
No, so that was the number that you voted $166,000
Oh, we've already
of all your
voted
capital.
166. And
Yep.
the 2580, it's not catching that, is it?
Nope. Nope,
Because you don't want it to catch 43. Okay.
it's not. It stops at 41.
Okay. Okay. So we're at 2580. Okay. And just thinking out loud, okay. And I apologize, but I'm literally doing this on the fly. So our historical appropriation has been 1996. Assuming that the town actually grows it at 2.5% this year, which is something that needs to happen if we're not going to repeat the morass that we found ourselves in over the past decade, that number would go up by about 50. So we should be seeing an appropriation of 2050 coming into the capital stabilization fund. We're going to need to spend out of that immediately. 540, which is coming off the debt analysis that Michelle provided to us a few weeks ago. So that number is 539,087. Let's just call it 540 and put it in at 539.1. If you no, put it in at 540. So that leaves us with what? 1510 that we can actually spend. Now, in terms of our capital stabilization balance, we should be sitting somewhere around 1.4 because I know we were below our 1.10 target, but then at STM they dropped in another 500 earmarked roughly for town hall. So Michelle, do we actually have a capital stabilization fund number at this time?
Yep, it's right there. 1428215.
Wow.
Can you see it?
My math actually got close. That's would have been a lot easier for me to just read. Sorry, where is it?
It's right at the bottom of the screen, right
The
here.
stabilization balance fund. There you go. I had to read all the way to the bottom. So 1428. Okay. And we're looking at an ask of 2.6, including all the town hall stuff. Michelle, if I could just ask you, so the bottom line is we're going to come up, even if we pull out the 428 and keep our stabilization fund at $1 million, that would bring us up to what, 1938. It's going to leave us, 600 short, which is entirely accounted for by the town hall stuff. We can fund a portion of it, but not all, is the bottom line.
And honestly, the windows, I think at this time, I think it's a stretch perhaps to be asking for them this year, at least at annual town meeting, because I don't think we have a solid number or design. And if we're going to replace the windows, or we're replacing in kind. So I think it's a little trickier than a straightforward roof replacement. Design of the sprinkler system is pretty straightforward. I think the windows get a little tricky.
Yeah, I'm just going to speak out loud here. This is yellow for a reason, but frankly, I think actually bringing the sprinkler system into compliance, and I'm one voice of 5, and I'm going to open up to the other 4 in a second here, encourage people to speak, but those windows seem so much less important than actually installing the sprinkler system in Old Town Hall and getting a permanent occupancy permit. We'll deal with the windows later. Like, nobody's been screaming about the windows. So I don't get it. But I'm curious what the other 4 people on this committee think about the windows. It seems out of order from a priority perspective.
Well, we certainly as a citizens group, we considered that it was either phase 2 or phase 3. We certainly never considered that as phase 1, for sure.
Yeah, windows go in the bucket with siding and a bunch of other stuff. And, I expressed this concern to a few select board members, which is just, if you take windows out, you open yourself up to a can of worms of stuff. And right now we don't have the budget to kind of start diving into stuff we find. So, no reason to do it now from my perspective.
Susan?
I agree. I thought we were just really considering the roof and the sprinklers as the priority items.
Roof sprinklers, and I think I've heard a case made for the HVAC, so that's kind of what I would expect. Michelle, are we missing something?
Chiller. You got to do something about the chiller.
I'm
that's what I mean. The
sorry,
AC.
I'm just simply putting in what the
Yeah.
select board's request was during last
Understood.
meeting.
My question's a little different. Are we missing something with regards to the severity and the urgency of the windows, or is where did this?
I think it was all about securing the envelope. I think that's where
Okay.
the windows came from.
Okay. All right. It's just, as a group, is the consensus that there would be a preference to see the money spent on the sprinkler upgrades and potentially the AC ahead of windows? Is that the consensus of this group? Want to do a thumbs up?
Sure.
All right. Corey's going to stay blank. Okay. Okay. So, look, we need a real number with regards to sprinklers, but certainly, we tried to appropriate it at town meeting. We wouldn't have a huge amount of room. If you pull the windows out, we fit. And we even have some money to start on sprinklers, depending on how big a project that actually is. I've heard varying views. So hopefully we can, we can resolve that. But isn't that miraculous? So you just made this 1930, and my math had 1938 of funding, Michelle. Maybe
It's a wrap.
It's only math.
There you go. So shall we? I entertain a motion to vote the entire spread. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. We will. We've got a bunch of yellow here. but we're getting closer. We just got to chase down these items. Is there anything else people would like to cover on this spreadsheet or this list? Okay. We do have 4 people online, so shall we go ahead and vote the minutes, which is the last item of our agenda, March 18th and April 1st? Has everyone had a chance to read them?
Mhm.
If we haven't, we can defer, or we can just vote them through with.
Well, so
Abstentions.
I don't think Mr. Dormitzer was at one of the two, which just leaves us a little bit tight on the voting.
Yeah. Susan, have you had a chance to read
We
them?
can still do it,
Yeah.
but
Yes, I read them.
Okay, do you have any comments?
No.
I didn't either. Look, in the interest of getting this done, we need 3 votes to pass this. It's minutes. There have been no comments.
let's do it.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the minutes of March 18th and April 1st.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second,
Roll call vote. Corey Evans,
Corey Evans, aye.
Susan Franklin,
Susan Franklin, I.
Brian Host, aye. And I think that brings us to the end of our agenda for the evening. When do we want to meet next? Next Wednesday? Does it seem to be working?
Right. Brian, for the sake of the minutes and the cleanliness of whatever, I think we should have Mr. Dormitzer officially abstain, and then we'll
Okay.
mark Mike as absent.
That makes sense. Ralph, your vote on the minutes?
I guess I must abstain.
It's stupid, but we just clean it up. Sorry.
Okay.
Stickler.
And Michael is dropped. Okay. And last question, meeting next week. When would people like to meet? Monday, Wednesday, conflicts? I mean, Monday's tight. We'd have to post the agenda tomorrow, so
I'm actually flying on Monday, so
Wednesday,
Wednesday.
Corey?
Yeah, I'll make it work. Wednesdays are tough, but yeah, it's fine.
Okay, Wednesday it is. Same time, same place, same day. And we'll pull together an agenda to get that out. And with that, and anything else to discuss this evening?
Can I ask one question?
Please.
So all the minutes that we have Leontina doing from 2021,
Yes.
should we put that at the beginning of the agenda just so we can knock those out and post those? Because we do have people requesting capital budget minutes.
Okay.
And we do have them, we just need the votes.
Okay. How many do we have, Michelle, in terms of
Oh,
minutes?
Several.
Yes, many.
Yes. How about this? I'll group them all together. I'll send them through email to everybody. I'll email blast them. And
Okay.
maybe, if we could put them at the beginning of the agenda just to get them out of the way.
Yeah, why don't you shoot them out and let's see how people feel about
Okay.
whether or not we're going to need to mark them up. What I don't want to do is turn an entire capital budget meeting into a markup session. If it turns out that we see these and we feel like they need revisions, maybe people will send in some suggestions in advance of them coming to committee. That might save a lot of time, so that by the time they come to us as a committee, we're ready to vote them through.
Okay.
But yeah, please, as a first step, email them to everybody, to the entire group, and ask for comments.
Okay, will do.
I think that's the best way to go.
We could also, I mean, since the warrant's closing and our workload's going to lighten up, you could just save and do a special just minutes only meeting. Cause
That's
like, I don't
true,
have to
too.
be in attendance, there's sort of thing. So
That's actually a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally going to defer this by a couple of weeks, Michelle. That I
Yep,
think
that's fine. That's
Corey,
fine. I
think
just
that's an
want to make
excellent
sure
idea.
that we're,
And you also piqued my interest. Timing. When is town meeting? When do we need to be done?
town meeting is June 3rd. The warrant has to be printed, has to be sent to the printer on May 7th, which means I think next week may be it because all these have to go to advisory and select board as well.
Okay.
For a final vote.
Okay.
So should we just invite everyone back next week?
Yeah, anyone that has open items, just invite them
Okay.
back.
Okay,
I think that's exactly right. And we'll hopefully vote the entire slate next week.
Okay. Yeah, we
Yeah.
certainly need, and Michelle, can you do this quickly, is get, I forgot who it was at the schools who kind of directs the IT deployment. You know, because I think there were a lot of questions that Susan and Lance, you know, really don't know, or really it's not their place to know. So if whoever's kind of managing the implementation of this stuff, because I know it's not Ron, if we could book them now, that way we have them next Wednesday.
Sure. Yep.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay, and I apologize, but let me ask a silly question because a thought just popped into my head. On town hall, we've got a number in this new spreadsheet for engineering the sprinkler system. Was that not fully engineered in 1987, including the old section? My understanding was actually engineered, it was just not deployed. Do we actually need to spend money on a new engineering study?
Not if we can produce the old engineering study, which I'm not sure that we have. It was my understanding that we cannot find any paperwork from 1987. Ralph, am I misspeaking?
Every single possible piece of paper has disappeared, miraculously disappeared, to an amazing degree. Okay, something that unprecedented. We could find absolutely every other property going back that far except that one. So that's very, very odd. But anyway, the point is, the only thing I have seen and we do have is in the archives, there is a record of the fact that the sprinkler system was engineered for the purposes of actually doing the historic building as well. That I have a record of.
Oh, okay, great.
But it does not say what the engineering was done. It doesn't say what
Oh.
was done. It only says it was sized for that purpose. Okay.
So we may or may not have the specific like layout drawings of where the sprinklers would go.
We do have very detailed drawings from 87. The one thing that exists are multiple copies of those drawings. I'd have to look at the drawings to see, or ask Clark maybe to look at them, to see if there was actually a layout specifically for those sprinklers. I don't remember, but that was there were definitely very detailed drawings.
I mean, if we have plans and they just weren't put in at that time, that would save a lot of time and money.
It would.
Somebody
So let me get with.
Yeah.
So let me get with Brian Joyce and have him. He's on vacation this week, but beginning of next week. And
just take a
and
look
see
at
what
it,
we can do.
because there's a huge sheaf of drawings specific for that 1987 edition. Yeah, that's the one thing that does exist. Right.
Is it just the addition or is it the old building as well, Ralph?
It was everything. Yeah.
Okay, it was everything.
It was everything.
Okay, so let's take a look at them and see what we can do.
Okay, yeah, I hate to pay an engineer to recreate the wheel, right? If the stuff already exists. It's really just pipe diameters and layouts and sprinkler heads. Okay. Anything else, or would someone like to make a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
So moved.
All right.
I'll give it to Ralph.
Either way.
Second.
think
No, I
Ralph
still
beat
want
you.
to. I'll give it back.
Ralph beat you, Corey. You're gonna have to second if you so desire.
I will take the second.
All right. And roll call vote. Susan Franklin,
Susan Franklin, aye.
Ralph Dormitzer,
It's all right.
Corey Evans.
Corey Evans, aye. And for the minutes, should I just go through and produce these off the recording later in the week? Brian, is that what you want me to do? Since Francine wasn't here.
Oh, jeez.
I will just do that. Never mind. I'll just take care of it. That we don't have to talk about it again.
I hope you can do this off of your notes as opposed to going back through the recording, Corey. I truly do. And I apologize for not assigning a secretary for this meeting for the purpose of minutes. That is my oversight, and I apologize.
Well, Corey, if you need help, I'm sure with my notes and your memory, we'll be able to get these minutes done.
The agenda is a good starting place.
Well, so is 3x speed on YouTube. So there's that.
You're a fan of the chipmunks. Okay, well, we're in the middle of a roll call vote, so I'm going to close out the vote by saying Brian Host, aye. We're now adjourned, and the time is 8:23. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Okay,
You
good
too.
night.